So let's begin tonight on the issue of the healing of Nigeria. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo is advocating for reconciliation, moral realignment, and the assuaging of the youth in order to ensure the healing of the country. Chief Obasanjo, who was speaking at a book presentation in Abuja, says that the divisiveness which was made manifest in the recent election and the events that have passed has been more pronounced in the elections, and there's a need for healing and a national reconciliation to be organized by the incoming administration. Let's take a listen to former President Olusegun Obasanjo.
Given what we saw during the elections, Nigeria is now even more divided and more corroded than we thought. This places a deep onus on any administration following the current one to urgently facilitate the process of national moral rearmament and national reconciliation that the potential to enhance healing for aggrieved and bereaved persons across Nigeria and to assuage the youth. This must be done in sync with the imperative of national value reorientation that Nigeria requires to build a collective sense of enduring and noble values and national belonging.
What does this mean? Coming from a former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, and some of the political debates that came before that election, and this kind of statement coming from that former leader, what does this mean? What is even healing? What is reconciliation? How do we go about it? Are we ready for it? Well, does it behove on the incoming administration to be led by Bola Tinubu? I'm being joined tonight by a democracy advocate and senior research fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development, Professor Jibrin Ibrahim. Thank you, Prof, for joining us tonight.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much indeed. Coming from former President Olusegun Obasanjo, saying that Nigeria is perhaps more divided, do you agree with that position, first and foremost?
Well, I think so. I was actually at the event. I was one of the panelists at the event. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should start from the title of the event itself, which is a return to governance and performance, which is itself very pregnant with meaning, mm-hmm. saying that we're just coming out of a period where governance has been very poor, if not absent, and issues of performance have not occurred. The other element of the governance regime we are getting out of is the excessive show of nepotism within that government in appointments. And that created a situation in which people felt excluded from governance. And that was the context in which President Obasanjo was making a plea to resist and turn back the clock on the divisiveness that has marked governance in recent years, and a new focus that will be based on inclusiveness and making people feel they belong to Nigeria's political system. So I think that's the context. And the real plea he was making, and I agree with that, is that the incoming government has a responsibility to address that serious that serious lack of governance that has characterized the regime, and try to bring a sense of belonging to the people of this country, especially the youth who have always felt excluded, have always been excluded, and this time around thought the elections will give them an opportunity to affirm themselves as players in Nigeria's political terrain.
So, Prof, apologies to cut in, but let me ask, because there are those who disagree. I say, oh, look, the disagreement we see during elections are not the true tendencies that we see in our nation. And for those who think that we have been more divided than before are not right. There are those who are of that school of thought that, in fact, I mean, this divisiveness has always been there. And that it's not as if there is anything different. We have always been divided by religion and ethnicity in our politics. But this time around, it's no bigger than what we have seen in the past. Do you agree with that notion?
Well, I feel there's a context issue, which is to say we're just coming out of an election, and that election created shock results. People who thought they control politics in specific locations discovered that others also have a say in the political process, and outcomes would not necessarily go the way of people who feel they control the political process, which is itself a very positive development in our electoral and democratic system. But that created a lot of fear and panic, especially within very powerful forces. And whenever powerful forces feel threatened, they tend to put one more gear in the politics of divisiveness. They tend to promote more ethnic and religious divisions so that, as it were, they can better control their own troops. So there are two elements. There are two elements in the divisiveness. The 8 years of governance we are coming out from, which is considered to be a period of intense nepotism, and electoral outcomes that created shockwaves among powerful actors.
Would you also say or agree with those who hold the notion, Prof, that these tendencies that we're seeing, it's not natural, it is not organic, in the sense that for a Yoruba man and an Igbo man to think they're not together or they're not never on the same plate, that has been mechanical, that has been created by some politicians from their own selfish reasons, like you have said, that we're coming out from a process. But would you say that that there are people who intentionally use these tricks to divide our nation? Do you see that playing out or played out in 2023 election?
Well, I definitely saw a lot of that play out in these elections we are just coming out from. There was a deliberate use of very aggressive and insulting language against certain people whose core citizenship was challenged. People were told they are not from here, you have no right to even vote. Every Nigerian has a constitutional right to vote. So when you tell somebody that he doesn't belong to the community, therefore you are going to deprive him or her of their constitutional right to vote, you are creating a very intense emotion of exclusion among members of the community, and that certainly heated up the political atmosphere.
So, I mean, I'd like to ask you, as an objective and independent person, if you look at the tendencies that we have in the country, the powers that be, the ruling force, and the opposition, and the voice of dissent, would you say that one has been fair to the other in terms of the engagement in the post-election era?
I think in the post-election era, I did note the spokesperson for the president-elect have been extremely aggressive and provocative in a lot of their comments. I see a lot of their statements laced with threats, intimidation, that, look, we are coming into power, you therefore better start behaving as we want you to. And I think it's very unfortunate because the president-elect himself, Ahmed Tinubu, came out with a very strong reconciliatory message calling on Nigerians to come together to heal the wounds. In fact, some of the words he used were the words President Olusegun Obasanjo used this morning in his speech. So that was the message I had from Tinubu, but that message was not carried by all his spokespeople. some of them tended to be extremely aggressive and were threatening people they considered in the opposition. And that's really a double jeopardy. Somebody has just lost the election, and rather than calm him down, you think the best attitude is to be aggressive towards them and to threaten them. I think that's completely unbecoming, and that contributed to heating up the politics.
Yeah, so on the side of the opposition, has the opposition been reasonable?
I think so. You see, one of the things I said before these elections is some within the opposition were overconfident of the success they anticipated they would have at these elections. And I think they did get significant success. But for many of them, they felt anything run of outright win of the presidential election would be going against their own calculations of outcomes. So they were in a position, I think, of unreasonable expectation of the outcome, and that might have created very strong emotions within them, and they did express their doubts over the elections. And everybody who loses an election may be right to express doubts. As one famous politician told me once, after losing a community elections, when every day in that house they buy bags of rice and feed the entire community, and when it came to the vote, that community that ate their rice every day never came out to vote for them. And that creates shock and surprise within some people, and they may overreact. But I didn't hear or see anything that was extraordinary or that justified some of the threats that were being directed at them.
Now, if we are to look forward to a reconciliation, how do we justify it legally? So I'm looking at the process. How it looks. Does it look alien to our legal process or our democratic dispensation or process, such that for us to know exactly what to do? Under what premise of law do we take the issue of reconciliation? We've seen it happen in Rwanda, in South Africa, when people are divided, when people are at loggerheads. We see how the crises are being resolved. But in Nigeria, if we were talking about a national reconciliation and a national unity, this is perhaps to a Tinubu presidency that will be installed on 29th of May. If you are to advise, where would they start from?
Well, I think the first point to make is that reconciliation is never a legal process. The legal process is about justice. Who won, where, what. So that establishes the facts, as it were. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is a political decision. First, let's not forget we run a first-past-the-post electoral system in which the winner takes everything and the loser has nothing, and therefore has concerns over why all these resources spent and what do I get at the end of the day. But when there is strong feeling about an election, what is good for the winner to do is to step back and say, we are going to all continue to live together. I don't want this level of anger and anguish to continue. Let me make political moves to make them feel less bad about the outcome.
Prof, look, I'd like you to, so let's talk a practical, and I love the manner in which you approached it. Looks to me that something that will warm the hearts of the opposition, or those who feel aggrieved, or those who feel this is a double whammy. We lost election, yet you're behaving towards us in this manner. But if you were Tinubu, for example, Prof, what would be your first practical move? Let's assume you get into office within the first 24 hours. Or what do you think should be going on in the mind of Bola Tinubu right now? If you were Bola Tinubu in the first 24 hours, what political move would you take that will be in the line of national reconciliation?
The first political move will be to say the legal system will not be used to intimidate unfairly any person for words they may have uttered that would have annoyed somebody. The second move, which is even more important, is to accept that these opposition parties and their actors are legitimate players in the political system. It's to have a discussion with them. What can we do to make you feel more included? There are a range of possibilities. In the past, in this country, for example, what are called governments of national unity have been established, in which members of the opposition have been appointed ministers, for example. But in some of those experiences, some members of the opposition feel quite rightly, that's not what I want. I don't want to be a minister in your government. I'll wait and contest the next election and take over power myself, which is legitimate and correct.
We've had,
so you don't know what is it they want. So you have to have an open discussion, a sincere discussion, and negotiate something that they will feel makes them feel less bad about what has happened.
Maybe call for some kind of a little conference, not maybe too much of a large talk shop, but maybe a room filled with leaders of opposition, and sit down at the table and say, look, these are our problems. These are our problems. What are your propositions? Do you think that could happen? Do you think a Bola Tinubu, for example, could call a Peter Obi, an Atiku Abubakar, or a Kwankwaso to the table? Do you see that happening, politically speaking?
Well, I think it would be a very smart move for Tinubu to do that, to sit down with them. It doesn't have to be a discussion over what will I get in power. It could be, for example, they've expressed dissatisfaction over elements of the elections. They feel some of the sections of the Electoral Act could be improved. So that could be, for example, a very good topic of discussion. What is wrong with our electoral system, and what do you propose as a solution to continue the process of improving that electoral system? That is something that will be useful for everybody, and out of that you can reach an accord on how to ensure that the next election would be better than the one that we've just gone through.
Let's close this conversation, and I'd like you, maybe in 60 seconds or thereabout, Prof, maybe you can help me tend to these concerns. One is the fact that how urgent do you think Bola Tinubu should attend to this matter? Do you think it's actually very critical? I mean, I've had people on the program who said, in fact, it's the first and the most important thing that an incoming government should attend to, the issue of national unity. And someone has suggested here that if he were president on the very first day of assuming office, that is what he will tackle. Do you think so?
I think my sense is that these discussions don't even have to wait till he's sworn in. No action can be taken till a new president is sworn in. But before then, you can start a conversation. Of course, matters are in court, and you have to make sure you do not bring discussions on matters that are already in court. But the general issue of how do we create a climate of inclusiveness can be done right now. And I feel it will be good for that reaching out to start, for that conversation to start. And once a new government is formed, then that conversation could be concluded and specific actions taken.
Although we've heard that from the other side, when the issue of government of national unity came up, they said, no, it's government of national competence that they will put together. But in 20 seconds or less, Prof, if you can tell us, do you think that the climate of disunity in the country questions or put a question mark on the legitimacy of the mandate of Bola Tinubu?
As far as I'm concerned, the mandate is a clear mandate, except if the courts see otherwise and inform us otherwise. But I do think he has a mandate. The election results were quite clear. And except for matters of law that are being handled in the courts right now, I don't feel there's any question mark on the mandate.
Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, a very senior fellow with the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, and a democracy advocate. Thank you so much, Prof. It's good to see you, and thank you so much for your intervention tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.